Hello and welcome back to our next video in our series on XYZ Mesh version 7. In this video, I'm going to be going over the graphing options that are available in XYZ Mesh version 7. If you missed our previous video, what we did is we covered how to input XYZ data into XYZ Mesh, the settings that you are going to need to adjust in order to create the graph that you're looking for, and then we converted that data into a mesh format, which we then exported into Excel. So in this video, I'm going to be telling you and showing all the functions of the graphing features inside of version 7. So first off, what I am going to tell you, I'm going to be explaining how I am adjusting and moving this graph. It's very simple and intuitive. What I am doing is I am clicking with the left mouse click and I am dragging the graph around whichever direction I want. So if I click in the middle, so in the middle of the graph, I can click in the middle and I can drag up and it will rotate in the X axis. So it'll actually rotate and pan the direction that you are dragging it. If you are over to the left and you click with the left click and drag up, it's going to rotate in the Y direction. And the same thing is if you go over to the right, drag and click, it will also rotate in the Y direction, but on the opposite values. So yeah, it'll move with the direction that you are dragging. If you would like to spin the graph, you left click, drag, and rotate it in whichever way you want to rotate the graph. If you would like to pan the graph, you can use both mouse clicks, so you do left and right, hold them down at the same time, and you can drag up to pan up, drag down to pan down, and the same thing with left and right. As far as zooming, you can zoom with the mouse wheel. So just zoom in with the mouse wheel, you zoom up, and zoom back out with the mouse wheel. Very simple, intuitive steps. If you would like to adjust all this manually, you can do so right down here with the little up and down arrow. So you can adjust this manually if you would prefer. The background we can actually change with the dark, or you can make it light, or you can make it gradient, where it goes from dark to a little bit lighter. And I prefer the gradient, so I'm going to keep it at that. If you actually want to see a ground layer, you can select the ground layer option right here, and that plots a grid for you underneath of whatever your plot is, so you can see a ground level. You can kind of get a better understanding of where everything is at. If you don't want the ground level, and you also don't want the arms or the axes visible, you can just deselect them. So the Z-axis right there, we can just deselect that, Y and X-axis. I like to leave those on, so I'm going to leave those on. As far as the lighting is something that was just added in version 7.0.2. If you deselect that, you can see that the lighting has changed. There's no differences in the depths. If that is something that you would like to add on or leave, you can either enable it or disable it, whichever is your own preference. If you would like to see depth coloring or coloring based on how deep something is, you can actually change on the color variant. And as you can see, the higher objects are red while the lower objects are blue. So they go from a smooth transition going down. It also has the coloring scale on the mesh format as well. And this is also something that can be exported into Excel, but we are going to cover that in another video. If you would like to see a bordering box, there is an option for that as well. And the bordering box is very simple. It's just a little box that goes over where your graphing is from the highest point to the lowest point with a little bit of a variant in it. And that way you can see exactly where your data is being produced at or in what range it is. This is very helpful whenever you go to manually adjust the scale. And what I mean by that, with the auto scale right here, XYZ Mesh will automatically scale your data to make it look as realistic as possible. So it will look at your data and it will automatically calculate it, trying to make it look as close to the original data as possible. Now, if you want to adjust this scale and make it more dramatic, you can do that. So by adjusting this scale and bringing it down, you can see that the lower points are now lower, the higher points are higher, and it's more dramatic. So the scale is a little bit, more squashed. And you can add this in at your own if you want to do that, or you can stretch this out and make it less dramatic. But using the automatic function, it will automatically create the ideal setting for you as far as scale. So we suggest that customers leave that on. The next function that I want to look at is the charting options down here. Now we kind of covered this in the previous video, but I'm going to go more in depth with it now. With the first option, it's usually a mesh format. That is the default option that we have available whenever you convert your data into a mesh. If you would like to revert it back to points, you can do that. And as you can see, there's different points. And if you'd like to change the size on this, the size button is right here. You can just adjust it to however big you want the size of the dots to be, the lines, the bordering box, you name it. Next, if you want to go down, lines, that is another option that you have. However, with lines, I would only suggest you do this whenever you are not graphing mesh data. If you're just graphing the XYZ data, lines is fine, but when you're doing a mesh format, lines get a little hard to look at. And the reason for that is because whenever you graph a mesh, you have to go down one column, over, up another column, over, then down. So you're getting this kind of zigzaggy look, even though that's not how the data should be looked at. So yes, lines is not typically what you want to look at whenever you have it in a mesh format. If it's just straight X and Y, then lines can be perfectly fine. Next is mesh, which we previously looked at already. Then we have a surface graph. A surface graph is something that was new to XYZ Mesh version 7. And this is similar to what Excel will export. Now, obviously, it won't be the same colors, but you can change that to whatever colors you want it to be. And finally, we have triangles. Now, triangles is very similar to mesh, except it's an extra line in there. So really, it graphs it a little bit slower than a mesh does. That's because there's more lines for it to process. You actually have about 3 times the amount of lines because you have to go over a grid and then go over it again and then create another line in between it. It's more lines, takes a little bit more time, but some applications require you to have triangles in it. So that's why that option is there. I'm going to go back to the mesh format so we can see it better. And then let's go down to the color options. Now the color options, you notice that if I change this color to something else, say aqua, it doesn't actually change, and that's because I have the color variant on. If I change that, then you can see now we have color variations. The outline is a feature that is over in the XYZ input window. And there's this little button right here that says show original outline. This is very helpful for whenever you are trying to see where your original data points were. So as you can see, there is a line drawing now of where the data points were and in what order they were put in at. So that is the outline feature. The next feature that I want to show you is the distance calculator, and this is a very neat feature that we have in here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select this so it's easier for me to see. The distance calculator is essentially what it sounds like. It will take a point from wherever on the graph that you choose and plot it against another point and tell you the distance. How you access that is it's the distance calculator button right here. If you click that, it's going to change color and it's going to say select the first point, and you use a left click to do so. So let's say I want this point right here. I now have that point selected and it says the starting distance is here. There's the X, there's the Y, there's the Z value of that point. And let's say I want to take that point against this point over here. I can select that as my new destination point, and there is a new line that appeared right there. And it says the distance is X, Y, and Z value of that. And given this is in meters, and it's also latitude and longitude, so those numbers are very minuscule. However, it's a pretty big difference. I believe that is about, that's 10, 15, that's probably about 5 acres, I would assume, distance right there. Now, I have been mentioning a lot about version 7 and the graphing and things like that, and then I kind of mentioned version 6. If for whatever reason this graphing simulator doesn't work for you and you would like to convert back to version 6 graphing, you can do that. We do not suggest you do it because version 6 is rather slow. But if you cannot view anything on here, then your only option might be to use the charting option. So if you go up to options at the top, you drop down and go to graphing options, you can see that GPU graphing is selected, and this is version 7 graphing. If you select chart graphing instead, and this is going to take a little bit to calculate in, but what chart graphing is going to do, chart graphing is going to bring up the version 6 graph of the data that we have, and it's going to plot it for you. Okay, and there we have version 6 graphing. Version 6 graphing is very similar to version 7 with the functionality. It doesn't have as much, but it is there. You still have the drag and drop and zoom features. I would suggest everyone try to go to version 7 graphing. The only reason this is in here is for the people who are using, say, Microsoft XP and they don't have access to a graphing engine that can handle GPU graphing. Most everybody will have something that can handle it, so I would suggest you just stick with GPU graphing. Okay, now for the rest of the graphing options, they are actually up in the options window or the options menu button. And if you select that down, you can go to graphing options and you can select different options for this. For instance, the origin is automatically calculated. That is the XYZ center location. As I said, automatically calculated for you. I would suggest you leave that on auto, but if you need it to be at a specific location, you can change that. You can set it at 000, or you can put a custom location in. You can also use the graphing range limits, which again is automatically calculated for you, but mainly this function is used in version 6 graphing. This function is obsolete in version 7 as it will automatically calculate for you, but the option is there to change it if you need to. Another option that is here is the window state option. So by default, XYZ Mesh has this in a docked state. If you choose a floating window, you can see that now this has went full screen as far as the mesh format here. And on the other screen, if I bring this over, I now have a floating window that has my chart on it. And this is really great for presentations or if you have dual monitors and you can pan this over. And something else that was just added in, you can adjust the size of the graph altogether. So if you want to make it full screen for a presentation or whatever you need, you can do that. And you can zoom this in as much as you want, as far back as you want, and you have all the functionality of rotating, zooming, panning, all that in the full screen mode. And if you ever need to bring it back with your settings, you just drag that back up and there's all your setting tabs again, and you can change these as needed. If you want to get this back to the regular state, you can either go up to options and go to graphing options window and click docked. Or the other option is you can just close out and it will automatically populate it back into your XYZ Mesh program. The chart options, this is mainly for the graph charting or chart graphing right here. So version 6 options, those are right here. Now there is an option for reversing the mouse order. This is for anyone who is using the functionality in version 7. If you click this, that means that all the functionality for the left click is now going to be on the right click. So for anyone who uses the right click instead of the left click, you can now select this option and you can use that interchangeably on the graph. Okay, and that is it for all of the graphing options inside of XYZ Mesh version 7. In the next video, I'm going to be covering the export options and maybe a few of the other features as far as exporting goes. If you have any questions about this video or anything I covered, please leave a comment down below. I love to hear from you guys. I'll try to answer them as best as I can. If you'd like to support the channel, go ahead and like our video, subscribe to our channel. We do not post videos very often, but when we do, we try to keep them very informative and keep them relevant. So if you'd like to stay up to date with everything Great Tech, go ahead, subscribe to our channel. Thank you all very much, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a great rest of your day.